This chapter is called A Men's Journey. As it turns out, my dad and I were both going to Philadelphia with Jeffrey. My mom couldn't take care of me at home and be violently sick at the same time, and my grandparents were away, so the Reds couldn't dump me with them again. Whew. Of course, Jeffrey was thrilled. Wow, Steven, we're going on a men's journey tomorrow. Me and you and Daddy, this is going to be great. Wait until my methotrexate drip starts. We'll get to watch Shrek and Peter Pan right in a row if we want. And then we'll say my stomach hurts and we'll both get Jell-O. And you can ride in a real wheelchair. And then you can come to play therapy with me. And if you want, you can go to the cafeteria during my Christine push if the throwing up will bother you. I'll try to be brave though, I promise. Do you think we can play cards while we wait for my Emma to work? I love Go Fish. That's what Mommy usually plays with me. Do you know how to play it? Meanwhile, my mom was upstairs taking a break from hurling so she could brief my dad. I find it interesting that Jeffrey, how old is he?
5.
He's about 5. And all this stuff is happening at the hospital, but he sees it as like, it's almost like a game and like he's excited. Even though it's like this terrible, horrible stuff is happening to him when he has to go through all these treatments. He's like, we could play Go Fish, or we can eat Jell-O, and we get to watch TV.
He's thinking of the positives.
I love that Jordan Sonnenblick adds that into the story because it really makes Jeffrey seem like a real 5-year-old. Because those are things that a 5-year-old would really be into. Okay, honey, make sure they give you the Emla cream as soon as you get there. Remember, it takes an hour to numb his skin completely, so you have to get it on there right away. Jeffrey likes it if you spread it over his port yourself, but don't forget to warm it up between your hands first so it won't be cold on his skin. Then they'll flush the port and do the blood work. Jeffrey doesn't mind seeing the blood drawn, but you might want to send Steven on an errand so you won't have to look at it. He hated watching them access Jeffrey's port at the emergency room that time. Okay, what's next? The oncologist. The oncologist will probably come in and ask you some questions before we start the methotrexate. I'll write a note tonight, but you can basically tell him that Jeffrey hasn't been vomiting as much and his CNS seems fine. He'll know what that means. Oh, and I forgot, if it's Dr. Arena, hold Jeffrey's hand. Jeffrey's afraid of him. If it's Dr. Moses, you're okay. He's Jeffrey's favorite. Speaking of favorites, Jeffrey loves the snow cones from the 3rd floor lounge. He swears they taste better than the ones on his floor. After a head swimming 20 minutes of this, my mom had to run back into the bathroom, but even then you could faintly hear, and tell Dr. Moses to call Dr. Perro as soon as the CBCs come down. Dr. Perro has questions about the leucovorin dosage. Then she had to stop giving orders for a while as sickness overcame her. It was going to be a long few days for all of us. Hours later, as I was lying in bed, I realized my dad still hadn't given a final ruling on the benefit concert. And then I started thinking about the bills and about what I would see the next day at the hospital and about schoolwork. I would miss by being absent. Needless to say, it took hours to fall asleep. When I finally did, I had the dream. As always, I woke up screaming, but this time it was even worse than usual because my mom was sick. She didn't come rushing in. By the time my dad got there, I had woken up by myself. I sat bolt upright. I smashed my head into my nightstand somehow. Ow! I bit the inside of my left cheek. I looked at my alarm clock, which was now blinking upside down on the floor. 2:29, 2:29, 2:29. As my father patted me awkwardly on my sweat-drenched back and my breathing slowed down to near normal, I thought, well, I might be gushing blood, but at least I get a few more hours of sleep. And then my dad leaned over, flipped the clock, put it back on the table, and that's when I realized it was really 6:22. Not only was it too late to get more sleep, it was too late. Period. The day had started with a bang, and a whimper. Before I knew it, my father, Jeffrey, and I were bundled into the car along with my school books for studying, my sticks and practice pad, and extra clothes for all of us. Naturally, in a rush, we'd forgotten something major, but we didn't know it yet. Dad was just trying to handle the pages and pages of notes my mom had heroically composed in the midst of her own bout of illness. Jeffrey was working on balancing a cup of juice and a Go-Gurt while eating breakfast in his booster seat, and I was sucking on an ice cube in a sad attempt to stop the bleeding from my gouged cheek. I hope that the neighbors were watching. I hope that the neighbors were watching this scene. I hope that none of the neighbors were watching this scene. The obviously sick lady swaying on the lawn in an old bathrobe, waving goodbye to the unshaven guy with the misbuttoned dress shirt who was driving 2 bald kids while one of them was intermittently spitting blood out the passenger side of window. Other than our chaos, it was so quiet on the block you could almost hear the tick, tick, tick of the property values dropping as passersby took in the tableau of horror. When we were about a mile from home, my dad noticed that the fuel light on the dashboard was blinking, so we stopped to get gas. I pumped while my father ran into the station to get a cup of coffee so he could spill it on himself while pulling out of the lot. Then, just as we started down on the on-ramp for the highway, Jeffrey shouted, "Oh no! I forgot Matt Medic! I forgot Matt Medic!" Sorry, Jeff, but we don't have time to turn us around. As it is, we're barely going to have time to spread that Ookla cream on your port in time. It's Emla, Dad, but I need Matt Medic. He helps keep the bad blast from coming back. I need him. Not today, Jeffrey. But, Dad! The car lurched and veered into a driving lane in what might optimistically be referred to as a close merge. And my dad replied through those famous clenched teeth, "Don't butt dad me right now, okay? I'm trying to drive in traffic. We're late. I got about 3 hours of sleep. I haven't shaved and I have no idea what I'm doing. And now I'm sitting in a puddle of hot coffee." A year ago, Jeffrey would have been good for about another half hour of whining, but now he just sat back with a sigh and sipped his juice. After a while, he assigned me a job for the duration. "Steven, it looks like Matt Medic is out of action. You have a new mission." I slurred back while desperately trying to avoid having my teeth touch the gaping hole in my cheek. "What is it, buddy?" "Keep me brave. Please. Just keep me brave." And then he finished his little meal and fell asleep, just like that. I stared out the window and I wondered why Jeffrey thought I, of all people, was somehow qualified to keep him brave. You'd think his first choice might be somebody who didn't wake up crying in a pool of sweat every other day, or perhaps somebody who could sleep through the night in a soft bed without injuring himself. On the other hand, I suppose his first choice was actually an inanimate injection molded plastic figurine. And as a second choice, I guess I would have to do. As we approached the hospital, we drove through the campus of the University of Pennsylvania. It was beautiful. Spring was just getting in gear. And there's all these happy college students walking everywhere in jeans and t-shirts, sweaters with shorts, mini skirts. Despite the early hour, I even saw a group of guys playing frisbee. And I thought how weird it was for Jeffrey to be driving past all these carefree people who had it made on his way to fight the 27th installment of a life and death battle against cancer. Good thing I was around to cheer my brother up with my positive outlook, huh? We parked and Jeffrey guided my father through the check-in procedure. Did you catch that? Who guided him through? We parked and Jeffrey guided my father through the check-in procedure because how old is Jeffrey? 5. He's 5, but this is his 27th installment. So he knows what to do, but he's only 5 years old. Like that kind of stuff makes you grow up and mature real quick. Then he led us upstairs to his floor. I paused for a moment and been in front of a set of double doors. I imagined and feared the sights beyond them for months on end, but now it was time to face them. We pushed through and stepped into Baldville, USA. There were sick kids everywhere, walking with IV poles, playing games, lying in beds, watching TV, sleeping. I'd known I'd see lots of little hairless little Jeffreys there, but there were kids of all ages. Some were older than me. Some were probably in grade school. And if you were infants, which made me really catch my breath. Some seemed healthier than Jeffrey and others were in such bad shape that they had to be pushed around in wheelchairs. There were a lot of family members too, but my eyes kept being drawn back to the patients. I was especially shaken by the sight of a girl who was probably my age. She was leaning against the wall in a robe, talking on a cell phone, even though you weren't supposed to use cell phones in the hospital. Her hair was almost gone, and her body was just a wisp. But you could tell that she had been gorgeous before the cancer. I hope she'd be gorgeous again. She looked over at me with these pale blue eyes that you could tell had a lot going on behind them. I looked away and hurried to catch up to Jeffrey. While my father and Jeffrey were getting set up in the room, I kind of hovered near the door. A friendly-looking youngish lady came up to me. Her name tag said, Andrea McDermott, Child Life Specialist. She started right into a conversation. It's a little overwhelming, isn't it? I'm Andy. You must be Jeffrey's brother, Steven. He talks about you all the time. He's a brave little guy. You know him? Yes, I check in on him every week. Sometimes I get him into an art class or a story time or a game hour. Other times we just talk or play cards. Go fish, right? Yep. I guess he enlists you to play too. Listen, you probably have about a half an hour before Jeffrey's ready for treatment. Would you like to visit the chapel? Why? Oh, well, your mother spends a lot of time there whenever Jeffrey is asleep or occupied, so I thought you might want to also. Mom prays for Jeffrey? Of course, Mom would pray for Jeffrey, but somehow it hadn't occurred to me that she had a whole routine for it. No thanks. I think I'll stick around just in case my brother needs me. Okay, I'm glad to finally meet you. Jeffrey thinks the world of you, and I can see why. The morning was like that. Hang around, stare at people, distract Jeffrey for a while, meet random new people who know all about my brother, stare some more. The amazing thing was how comfortable Jeffrey was there. I mean, it seemed like a very nice place, and I was glad so many people cared about him, but I couldn't imagine feeling that at home in a cancer ward. We ate lunch while Jeffrey was getting his methotrexate, whatever that was. Evidently, this medicine was going to drip into him for 24 hours, and then they would give him other drugs to minimize the poisoning he would get from this drug. Ugh. Anyway, after lunch, my dad went to talk with the doctors. Jeffrey and I were watching Shrek on video, and all of a sudden, an alarm started clanging away. I must have jumped about a foot, but Jeffrey barely blinked. Jeffrey, what is that? Is there a fire? Should I get you out of here? He didn't even look away from the TV. That's just a code, Stephen. It happens all the time. Wait, a code? Wasn't that like on those TV hospital shows when somebody... Just then a whole squadron of medical people ran by the open room door carrying all sorts of equipment and shouting directions at each other. I was sure then that a code was when a patient's heart stopped. All those doctors and nurses were charging down the hall to try and jumpstart a child's heart. And Jeffrey saw this so often that it didn't even tear him away from his movie. The day went on like that with an unlikely combination of boredom, anxiety, and bland food that you can only find in hospitals. My early evening, as Jeffrey was dozing off, my father was talking with yet another medical person about something. I couldn't stand to be sitting in the room anymore. I grabbed my sticks and pad and set out in search of a private place to practice. In a hidden little alcove at the very end of the hall, I found a tiny room with washers and dryers. I guess it was there so families could do their laundry during long stays, but I had my own mission going on. I sat on top of the washer. I put the pad on top of the dryer. I hooked the door shut with an outstretched foot, and I started running through my rudiments. It felt great to be concentrating on myself again, and the mindless repetition was relaxing. I must have played for about 45 minutes non-stop, and then somebody banged on the door, which startled the heck out of me. I half fell off the washing machine. As I reached for the door, I dropped my sticks with a massive clatter. At the same moment, I realized I had once again bitten my cheek in the exact same place, and it was now bleeding like a stuck pig. I swung the door open with a semi-angry, "What?" And guess who was standing there? Looking somewhat taken back by the blood-drooling, shave-headed madman in the closet, it was the girl that I had seen earlier that morning. She was wearing jeans and an Aeropostale sweatshirt instead of a robe, but those eyes were unmistakable. Hey, I didn't mean to bother you. I just wanted to see what was going on here. There's not much action around here at night. Yeah, I noticed. I'm sorry I yelled. I just kind of zone out when I'm playing. I listened for a while before I knocked. You're really fast. Hi, I'm Samantha. Hi, I'm Steven. My brother Jeffrey is... Oh, yeah. Everybody here knows Jeffrey. He's quite a character. Did he tell you about the time that he kissed a night nurse? Oops. Anyway, he talks about you all the time. Steven the rock star. So when I heard the drumming, I kind of figured it might be you. By the way, did you know that you're bleeding? Yeah. You want to come with me to go get some ice? Sure. There's a snow cone machine on the other end of the hall, but that's not as good as the one on the third floor, I've heard. So we got our snow cones and sat in little kids' play lounge to talk. At some point, my dad saw me there but kept walking into Jeffrey's room. Nobody interrupted our conversation, but we talked until after midnight. I told her everything about my year. Renee, Annette, drums, school, Jeffrey, and Jeffrey. And she told me everything too. Just like Jeffrey, she had ALL. But unlike Jeffrey, she had 2 relapses of her leukemia in the past 4 years. Now she was tired all the time, and she rarely got to leave the hospital, and her bones were starting to ache every minute of every day. Things didn't look good. Do y'all know what a relapse is?
No.
Okay, so when you have cancer or leukemia, if you beat it and you're cancer-free for a little while, things are good. But if you relapse means that the cancer came back, and you have to go through all that stuff again. So relapsing is definitely not a positive thing. And I believe it says that Samantha's had 2 relapses in the past 4 years. Things didn't look good. How's your family doing with all this? Well, my mom's a single parent, and we almost never hear from my dad. I have one older sister, but she's away at college. We used to be really, really close. I still call her on my cell phone every few days, but she never stays too long. She hasn't visited me here since Christmas, but she said she promised she'd fly home in May to see me for my birthday. I hope she does. Kind of sounds stupid, but when I was little, I tried to do everything just like her. She used to love ice cream cakes, so I loved them too. For a couple of years after I got sick, she used to bring me an ice cream cake on my birthday. Last year, she couldn't make it home. I mean, she had a good reason and everything. It was finals time at college, but it sucks having hospital cake for your birthday. It really sucks. Ooh, I'm sorry. You don't have to be sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. You're here for your brother. Well, I guess I am, but I get mad at him sometimes, and I haven't been here with him before today. Well, you're here for him now. Believe me, that counts for something. I don't know if you caught it. Here's Samantha. She is Steven's age, like middle school age girl. This is her 3rd round of cancer. She had cancer. It came back twice. So that's 3 times in 4 years that she's had to deal with this. She's super sick. Her mom's busy working. Her sister's away at college. So who's there with Samantha?
Nobody.
Nobody. To go through all of this treatment and all of the challenges that presents, and to have nobody there for you, sounds pretty miserable. We talked for a while more after that about all kinds of stuff. Music, the opposite sexes, school, although she had been absent for a month and had switched over to a tutor at the hospital, family. It's funny, I always think my life is so massively boring, but she wanted to know every detail. It was like she was so hungry for a normal 8th grader's experiences that she needed to drink in mine. Every once in a while, especially as it got later and later and her last dose of painkillers wore off, she would flinch for a second, but her eyes never lost the intensity I'd noticed earlier. At some point, we both got really sleepy, but nobody wanted to break the spell that encircled our little couch amid the rainbow-colored animals and crayon boxes. Finally, a nurse came in and gave Samantha a cup full of pills, and things changed. When the nurse walked back out, the mood had vanished, and we were just 2 bald kids on a sofa. We started the whole look at the time thing that grown-ups always do when they're breaking away from an awkward encounter at the supermarket. Before we went our separate ways, though, Samantha had one more thing to tell me. Stephen, stay with your brother. Stay with him, Stephen. No matter what. Do you promise? What was I going to do? I promised. As Samantha turned to start her slow walk back to her room, I had a last idea. I ran after her. I told her to wait right there. I charged down the hallway to the laundry room. I got my drum stuff, and I galloped back. Here, Sam, I want you to have these sticks. They're my favorite pair for practicing. Pearl Mark 5A hickory with nylon tips. Keep them. And maybe I can give you lessons when I come back down. Would that be cool? Stephen, thank you. That would be great. Happy early birthday, Samantha. Happy early birthday, Samantha.